Adaeze flipped through page after page, each one another dagger of betrayal. Her father had fought quietly, using knowledge, not fists. But knowledge had not saved him. In the end, he was buried with his secrets, until now. That night, she went to the sacred grove alone. The moon was swollen and bright, and the wind moved through the trees like breath. She sat before the baobab tree and spoke not as a leader, not as a daughter, but as a child of the land. She asked for a sign. Something stirred. A cold shiver wrapped itself around her spine, and suddenly she saw a figure, or perhaps only felt. It was tall, faceless, clothed in the dust of ancestors and the scent of burning herbs. Its voice was not a sound, but a memory. It did not threaten, it warned. What they dig, they will awaken. What they take, they cannot carry. She blinked and it was gone, but the feeling remained. The land had spoken. Now it was up to her to listen. Days passed. Adaeze could no longer walk the village without feeling the pull beneath her feet. Children played atop sacred stones. Foreign surveyors inspected hills with quiet nods. A new road was being marked by men who refused to say who had hired them. Even Chisholm began to distance himself, his smile now thin, his words uncertain. "Maybe they're right," he said once. "Maybe this is bigger than you." But Adaeze had made her choice. She would not run. She would not sell. She would fight. The battle would not be with bullets or blades, but with truth, with proof, with spirit. She gathered the journal, the letters from Papa Kono, the ancient symbols etched. In the altar, she met with Papa Kono again and told him everything. He nodded slowly. "Your father," he said. "He saw this coming. He planted the tree, but he knew you would water it." Together, they went to the elders. She stood before them, spine straight, voice steady. She spoke of what lay beneath the village, not just the wealth, but the responsibility. "We are not owners of this land," she said. "We are its guardians." Some listened, some mocked. Madame Ngozi smiled the entire time. "You have spirit," she said. "But spirit won't stop a bulldozer." Adaeze stepped closer. "Then I'll lie in the path of one." The room fell silent. The elders agreed to wait, to think, to pray. But Adaeze knew there was no time. That night, as she walked home, she saw a flame in the distance. Her family's compound was burning. The fire danced like a demon, bright and cruel. Someone had sent a message, but they had also made a mistake. Fire could not break her. It could only purify. The next morning, barefoot and covered in ash, she stood at the village square. "This is not a fight for land," she said. "This is a fight for soul." And in that moment, she was no longer the orphan girl who had come with questions. She was the woman who would answer for generations. It began not with shouting, but with paper, forged, stamped, and delivered in silence. Madame Ngozi's allies, slick in their collared shirts and thick with entitlement, produced a new will, a version that conveniently erased Adaeze's name, and claimed her father had changed his mind before death, leaving the estate to a distant cousin. The villagers were confused. Some murmured in support, others raised eyebrows, and confusion is a seed that grows quickly in soil watered by power. The elders gathered. Documents were examined, stamps compared, names questioned. But in Umuahia, paper holds no weight without the blessing of tradition. And so the council ruled that Adaeze's claim could not stand unless she fulfilled the Jisung, rites of succession, a ritual reserved for true heirs, one not performed in decades, one rumored to be dangerous, even deadly. She stood before them, fists clenched at her sides, eyes steady. "If this is what the land asks, then I will answer." She was led to the sacred grove at dawn, barefoot, dressed in white, her face marked with chalk and ash. The women sang low, mournful songs as they tied the red cloth around her waist. The ritual required her to walk a path of thorns and flame, to kneel at the ancestor stone, to speak the names of those who came before without hesitation. A single misstep, they said, and the spirits would reject her. She did not flinch. She walked through the fire. She named them. Her voice did not shake, and when she finished, the wind changed. The trees stirred. Even the silence seemed to bow. The next day, the elders confirmed her passage. The land knows you, they said, but the people must still decide. That was the harder fight, because a village is not led by ritual alone. It is held by trust, and trust does not come easy. Madame Ngozi began her campaign. She spread whispers like disease, that Adaeze brought bad luck, that the compound fire was her own doing, that she was a witch trained in the city to come back and steal the land. Her food was poisoned. She survived. Her name was dragged through the mud of gossip and old grief. Even a goat was mysteriously slaughtered, its blood smeared at the entrance of her hut. She woke to find the elders staring, judgment heavy in their silence. And still, she did not bend. She swept her threshold clean. She stood in the square and listened. She did not shout. She served water at funerals. She danced at weddings. She helped lift wood at the rebuilding of the school. Slowly, hearts began to turn, but not all. Chisholm, once her fiercest defender, now walked with hesitation. "It's too much," he said one evening. "They fear you more than they trust you." She looked at him and saw the weight he carried, the pressure to conform, the fear of being on the wrong side. "So you'll walk away too?" she asked. He said nothing, and his silence was louder than any answer. That night, she sat alone at the edge of the river. She asked the water if she was enough, if blood and spirit and suffering were not already proof. She cried not as a child, but as a woman learning that strength can be a lonely road. The next morning, she was gone. The village woke to find her hut empty, her name unanswered. Some called her a coward. Some mourned. Papa Cunnel said nothing, only closed his door and lit incense. 3 days passed. Then, on the 4th, little Emmy ran into the village, shouting, "She's coming back." And she came, walking slowly, proudly, covered in ash. Her eyes were clear. In her hand, the deed to the land, dug from beneath the ancestor tree, wrapped in her father's journal, and sealed with the sacred cord. Papa Cunnel walked beside her, holding the ancestral staff. "You want proof?" she asked. "Here it is." She turned to Chisholm. "And if you still doubt me, walk away. But don't ever say I didn't fight for you." The crowd gathered. Even Madame Ngozi stood at the edge. There were no more whispers, just silence. The elders stepped forward. One by one, they touched her shoulder. The vote was cast. The rite was fulfilled. Adaeze was declared rightful leader. In that moment, she did not cheer. She wept. And the village, finally, wept with her. 3 days passed in silence, and still the villagers whispered about the girl who had walked into their lives with fire in her eyes and vanished without a word. Some said she had fled, ashamed and broken. Others believed she had gone to the city to surrender her claim and start over far from the judgment of the ancestors. But Papa Cunnel remained quiet, sweeping the compound each morning as if waiting for dust to carry a message. On the 4th day, as the morning mist still hugged, the rooftops and the chickens had not yet begun to stir, a small voice echoed through the village square. It was little Emmy, barefoot and breathless, his tiny hands clutching something wrapped in cloth. "She's coming back," he cried, over and over. "Adaeze is coming back." And when she did, the village stood still. She was not the same girl who had walked away. Her feet were caked in ash. her eyes lined with soot, but there was clarity in her gaze, as if the silence had sharpened her soul. She walked straight to the square, her pace steady, her hands calm. Beside her was Papa Kunal, and in his hands, the ancestral staff, the carved symbol of leadership, long buried, now returned. Adaeze held a bundle close to her chest. When she reached the center, she knelt and slowly unwrapped it. Inside was a faded letter and an object wrapped in goat hide. She lifted the letter first. "This was written by my father," she said. It was hidden beneath the ancestor tree, sealed in the earth. He knew they would come for this land. He knew there would be a day when his child would have to finish what he started. Her voice did not tremble. She stood and held the object. In her other hand, a bronze emblem shaped like a kola nut split in two, the traditional seal of the Okafor bloodline, lost for years, now shining faintly in the sunlight. "This is the true mark of our lineage. You cannot forge what the earth remembers." The villagers gasped. Even the oldest elders leaned forward. Then, from the crowd, Chisholm stepped out. He did not speak at first. His eyes searched hers, as if looking for the pieces of the girl he once knew. "I was wrong," he said at last. "I let fear choose for me. But I am choosing now." He dropped to one knee. "You are our voice, and I will follow it." Others began to murmur, some bowing their heads, some stepping closer. Madame Ngozi, arms folded, stood still. Her mouth curled into something between disdain and disbelief. "So, you found a trinket," she said. "Words from the dead don't rule the living." Adaeze looked at her and smiled softly, not with pride, but with the peace of one who knows who she is. "Then let the living decide." The council was called. The villagers gathered again beneath the ancient tree where judgments were once made and justice had once been sacred. The staff was placed at the center, beside the emblem, the letter, and the journal. One by one, elders spoke. One by one, hands were raised. And when the final vote was cast, the drummers began. This time, not in mourning, but in welcome. Adaeze stepped forward and took the staff in her hands. She walked to the sacred stone at the heart of the village and lit a small fire using the herbs her mother once used for blessings. Smoke curled into the sky, and the crowd fell into silence. She dug a shallow hole beside the stone and planted a tree, a young Iroko, small now but destined to rise tall and wide with time. "This," she said, "is for tomorrow. For every child who doesn't know where they come from. For every voice that was once silenced." The fire crackled beside her, the tree rooted beneath her, the people standing around her, no longer doubting, no longer divided. The land, it seemed, was breathing again. And Adaeze, no longer orphan, no longer outsider, had become the story herself, the drumbeat in the soil, the fire in the wind, the living answer to her ancestors' prayers. The drums did not stop the day she was declared leader. They echoed into the night, not in celebration, but in remembrance. The village of Umuahia had chosen, not with blind trust, but with weary hearts that had watched generations rise and fall like the sun behind the hills. Adaeze stood beneath the great Iroko tree, the ancestral staff in her hand, her mother's cloth tied across her shoulders, her father's journal pressed close to her side. The air was thick with dust and change. It did not happen overnight. Power never moves gently. At first, the people watched her with cautious eyes, waiting for the fire in her to fade. But it didn't. She worked. She listened. She learned. She sat with the elders at dusk and asked them for stories. She stood with the children at dawn and asked them for dreams. The village was not rebuilt in one grand act, but in many small, quiet ones. A new well was dug where the old one had gone dry. A schoolhouse reopened with blackboards reclaimed from storage in walls painted by the villagers themselves. The market square, once choked by silence and suspicion, began to hum again with trade, with voices, with life. Adaeze did not rule from above. She walked among them. She planted crops beside the women, sang lullabies to children as they fell, asleep in their mother's arms, and danced when the rains returned, her feet bare against the red clay, her laughter unguarded. The goats still wandered too far. A generator still coughed on its worst days. Some roofs still leaked, and some wounds, though hidden, still bled quietly beneath the surface. Forgiveness, she learned, did not bloom in every heart at the same time, and not everyone stayed. Madame Ngozi left quietly one morning, her compound stripped of power, her name no longer feared, but also no longer cursed. Some said she moved to the city. Others believed she remained nearby, watching from the trees. Adaeze did not chase her. She did not need to. Her battle had never been against one woman. It had been against forgetting, against silence, against the slow, quiet death of a people's identity. One evening, as the sun spilled gold over the hills, little Emmy ran to her side and tugged at her wrapper. "You said the tree was for tomorrow," he asked. "When is tomorrow?" She smiled and lifted him into her arms. "Tomorrow," she said, "is already growing." And indeed, the tree they had planted now stood taller than a man, its leaves rustling like applause in the evening breeze. Beneath it, the village gathered for naming ceremonies, for songs, for stories, once silenced and now spoken boldly. A painting of Adaeze's parents was hung in the school, her mother holding a calabash of herbs, her father with the ancestral staff, their eyes painted soft and strong. Adaeze visited often, not to mourn, but to remember that her fight had not started with her, and it would not end with her either. Legacy, she realized, was not a trophy. It was a duty, a living, breathing thing that required tending, like a field, like a wound, like a child. She stood once more in the village square, just as she had when the fire tried to claim her, when the lies threatened to bury her. But now there was no doubt in the eyes around her, no distance in the way they stood. She was theirs, and they were hers. She raised the staff once more, not for ceremony, but to remind them. "Inheriting a legacy is easy," she said. "Keeping it demands everything." And in the wind that passed through the trees, in the fire that still glowed gently at the shrine, in the rhythm of the children's feet as they danced through the dust, the ancestors answered, not with words, but with peace. She came to the village carrying only questions, a suitcase, and a past buried under silence. She was the girl they once called cursed, the child no one reached for, the outsider who returned not with demands, but with a quiet fire. They had sent her away when she was small, but the land never forgot her name. Through betrayal, trials, and the weight of her father's legacy, she found her voice. She faced forged documents and poisoned words, rituals meant to break her spirit, and wounds that stretched far beyond blood. But she did not bend, and when they burned what she had, she rose from the ashes not in anger, but in purpose. Adaeze did not just inherit land. She inherited a people, a history, a duty. And step by step, choice by choice, she transformed from the girl who watched from doorways into the woman who stood at the center. She fought not just to prove she belonged, but to remind them all that they did too, that their stories mattered, that their land was more than soil. It was memory, voice, and spirit. She built not just schools and wells, but trust. She didn't erase the past. She honored it. And in doing so, she turned pain into power. She planted trees where fire had once raged, taught children the names of ancestors once silenced, and reminded the village of the strength found in stillness, in roots, in truth. Some scars remained. Not every heart softened. Not every wrong was righted. But the village stood, breathing, alive, united. Because Adaeze had not come to lead from above, she came to rise with them. And in rising, she became more than heir, more than daughter. She became legacy made flesh, a living answer to the prayers of those long gone. She was no longer just the orphan. She was the leader, the seed, the storm, the storyteller. And as the drums echoed into dusk, one truth remained clear. Inheriting a legacy is easy, but keeping it, holding it with love, leading it with courage, and passing it on with grace, that demands everything.